Welcome back to another episode of Energy 101. I'm Sydney. We are here with Jules.
I'm back.
Our fashion expert is back, leaving for Arizona this weekend, but we caught her before she heads out. Today we are here with Vicki Knott from Crux.
Hi.
Vicki's visiting us from San Francisco. She was here for some meetings, so we snagged her for an episode. So I know on one episode we've already talked about, in terms of oil and gas, the difference between upstream, midstream, and downstream. Vicki, you work in midstream, and that is what we're going to talk about today. So I think to kick us off, let's talk about Crux and how you got into the industry.
Yeah, so got in because I worked in pulp and paper and just really liked control systems. And graduating in, I think I was graduating like 2011, and it wasn't exactly a hot time for pulp and paper. Everybody was like, oh, yay, plastic is recyclable, which we all know is a little more complex than that nowadays. Paper is actually a very sustainable resource. Anyway, so at the time, I was like, okay, I'm going to go into oil and gas. Like that seems to be like the best thing to do. So I went into, I started working for the company that has the Keystone pipeline. So I trained as a control room operator there, commissioned valves in the field. So big 24-inch valves, like the size of our heads or bigger.
Yeah.
And then, came to understand that the way that we operate pipelines, which is effectively midstream, is through procedures, checklists, and rules of thumb in a central control room with a person. Think of like a pilot in a cockpit.
Right.
And they're actually operating it. And it's like, okay, well, this person's doing this, and sure, it's digital, as in they're pushing buttons like on their phone, but it's not on the phone, it's on a big screen. But like they're pushing these buttons, but they still have to use paper procedures to do it, right? Like they're not, there's no automated smartness around. You can't tell Alexa to turn on the lights. Like it doesn't work that way. So we set out to start automating that for control room operators, because control room operator fatigue is the leading cause of safety and environmental incidents in the industry.
Wow.
Yeah, and so people don't know that. So it's like, okay, well, if we can mitigate their workload, make their lives easier, we can really make a big impact. On top of that, as we divest from oil and gas over time, it's going to take time. We need to make our existing assets as efficient as possible, also from an energy transition standpoint, and just from like the right thing to do. And so the more throughput you can get through existing assets, the better. Automating your control room operator's workload actually straight up increases the utilization of your midstream pipeline assets. So more revenue and more throughput. More
Revenue,
efficiency.
that's the magic word.
Profit, actually. We love that word.
We love profit better.
Yeah, even better. So yes, I hope that was a not too technical deep dive, but I would love to, is there any of that I should elaborate on for the folks who would like to learn more about what all those things mean?
So when you say like a control room operator, are you like on like a rig site, like what?
So it's in like an actual central control room. So for example, one of the biggest pipeline companies in Canada, their central control room that operates, I believe, hundreds of thousands of kilometers or miles of pipeline. They have a control room in Edmonton, and they're operating all of those pipelines from one place in Edmonton. And so when they send a command on that screen, it will operate a valve in Texas.
Oh, wow.
So really, really cool. So you can think of it a little bit too like air traffic control, but with actual control, right?
Right.
So that's kind of a neat
cool.
thing. And it's and there's people that work in shifts. So they're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, making sure these assets are running to keep our economy going, essentially.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so I know, let's go back, the basics, midstream.
Yeah.
Where does that fall?
Yes.
In the timeline, I guess you should say,
and the supply chain.
Oil. And the supply chain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So upstream is where you're you've got all your rigs and your drilling and you're pumping oil with all your pump jacks and stuff. And then it connects into gathering pipeline systems, which are midstream, which then goes into gas plants for separation of your gas and your oil, midstream, then goes into transmission pipelines, midstream, which then ends up in terminals that will end up in refineries or at, shipping places and things like that. And that's your downstream. And then downstream would also include your petrochemicals to make your plastics and things. Yeah. So it's all the stuff in between is aptly called midstream. It's everything in between upstream and downstream.
Is midstream.
Is midstream.
Yeah, literally. So if you're not upstream and you're not downstream, you're midstream. There's no other option.
Exactly.
Love it.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about, I loved what you said about control room operators. From a safety perspective, their fatigue is causing the most issues?
Yeah.
Problems?
Almost every major leak that's happened on an oil pipeline was control room operator error.
Oh.
Yeah.
Could you imagine being that person?
Is it like it's like human error?
Human error. Yeah. So like
okay.
fatigue, fatigue is essentially like the way that it's defined by PHMSA, so like the regulator in the US, is it's defined by like long periods of inactivity followed by very short bursts of extreme activity. And it gets like very exhausting on the brain.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you guys can imagine that when you have like something you really need to get done and you're like hyper focused for like an hour, then you need a nap. Right? Or you start like zoning out. You can't like focus on it anymore. So that is direct, like that fatigue directly leads to human error, right? So anything that we can do to reduce their workload or take away the human execution of these things will increase the safety.
So is that where essentially like robots are coming in?
Yeah, so we actually call our product PipeBot.
PipeBot.
Isn't it cute?
That is cute. I was going to say, it sounds really cute.
I know. And it's very like a sticky name because we have customers who don't even know our our actual company name. They're just like, oh, you guys are PipeBot. I'm like, sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, so it's like, they're like virtual robots, not like real robots, right?
Right.
Like there's not like a humanoid robot pushing buttons at the console. Like that's not what's happening. But it's essentially like a software program that uses control systems to predict what the set points, you know, the execution of the button pushing should be and does it on their behalf. And yes, we call it PipeBot.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what's a typical shift like for someone, a human working in the control room? Like where that fatigue, like where does that come into play?
Yeah.
What are those conditions like, I should say?
Yeah, conditions are good. And like, so it's like, you come in, you get in at 6 a.m. Usually shift starts at like 6:30 or 7. Again, depends on the company. So you come in, you know, you do shift handoff with whoever was working that specific console before you. And the console would be like, it's like your desk with your like 9 screens, right? Like think like NASA.
Right.
And your person is sitting there. So you're switching off with them. It takes like a half an hour or more to like, okay, what were the things that happened? What's your logs, right? Like, let me see your logs. What did you log for activity last night? What are your pump orders? So it's like, okay, so what batches need to be shipped to what locations from oil scheduling based from the trading teams? And then like, okay, what's happening right now on the screens? So you do that handoff and then you sit. And so say you're operating like a big mainline pipeline. So let's say the Keystone line, since I know it very well, you know, you're having to deliver batches of product, which are like batches of crude oil. And there'd be like heavies and lights and like sours and sweets. And they come in like 100,000 barrel batches. So you're essentially sitting there managing this like giant garden hose as it pushes peanut butter followed by oil, followed by water. And you have to manage all of the pump stations to manage how those things move throughout the line all day long. So if you think of it of like, if peanut butter is going through the line, it needs more energy to push it, right? Because it's a higher viscosity. So you have to like up your pumps and like get things moving harder. But then it's starting to squish your oil, your cooking oil type viscosity stuff. So how do you manage that in terms of like not too much mixing? So your control room operator is constantly like turning gears, trying to keep this thing running as optimally as possible. At the same time, they're getting calls from the field saying, hey, I've got this call out, you know, this farmer wants to dig in this area. Like, is this safe? Like, what's going on here? Or you'll get like, you know, someone calling, I need to take this pump out for maintenance. Like, can you bring the line down? On top of that, they'll have typically your VPs coming through, doing tours of the control room of like, hey, look at this shiny control room and how hard all of our amazing people are working. And like really as a control room
and they're all like dying on the inside.
They're all dying on the inside. Not always, of course. And people do love their jobs and they're fantastic at it. But like kind of like the point that you suggested earlier, like, you know, if you were that person that made that mistake, like you're going to beat yourself up over it.
Right.
And that's not fair. It's like, how can we set those folks who are literally running our energy infrastructure, how can we set them up for success and not put them in those positions, right?
Well, as you were going through all of that, the only thing I could think of is that should be automated. Like, why is all of those manual processes being done by one person who's responsible for manually doing all of it? It just seems like a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. So I like to equate it to of like, think back in the day when like pilots didn't have autopilot software and they're just like hanging on
right
for like 12 hours straight. It's like that.
That's also terrifying for anyone on the plane.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to get in a plane.
No.
With a pilot flying without autopilot software. That's great. That's like crazy town.
What if they fall asleep? What if they sneeze and like something happens?
Exactly.
So I know like there's a lot of talk around just like, oh, robots are going to take over the workforce. Is that a big thing like in what you guys are doing with PipeBot? Like are people freaking out like, oh my gosh,
So you'll laugh at this one. When we talk to like control room operators, they're like, this is awesome. We need this.
Really?
Because they're like, they know their jobs. Like, you need a person there to operate this stuff. They're just like, how can we make it easier? And they're like us. Like, they understand, like, you know, a lot of them are actually millennials. So like, it's like, okay, my phone can do this and Alexa can do this. Why can't this piece of equipment that I work at every day do this? But it's funny when you talk to a lot of engineers in the oil and gas companies, the midstream companies, the engineers are like, they'll say that. They're like, the control room operators are going to hate it. And I'm like, when's the last time you talked to a control room operator? They do not hate this. So yeah, so it's actually like, I can see where people would assume that. But I think in this specific case, like the workload is so much and it's such high stakes that it's not the case.
Right. It's just making it more efficient.
Yeah. And like, it's not going to get rid of anyone's job.
Right.
It's just making it easier. We still need pilots and planes.
Exactly.
I was just gonna say, what's the line in the sand for that? How far it goes to the point where you do still need a human there.
I think it's a safety thing, right? Like if it's something that's critical, like a plane, like you don't want to get in the plane without the software, but you don't want to get in the plane without the pilot. And I think like, you know, energy infrastructure is so critical, like we're moving explosive things and it is a safety issue, like for human lives, if it's not done correctly. So I think you need both, right?
Absolutely.
Like it's like you need the backup.
Right, because in my mind on a plane, autopilot goes out.
You got
a
person.
pilot, right.
Yeah.
For some reason, PipeBot is down. I mean, as we know, energy infrastructure could be a power outage, could be God knows what. You still need someone there that knows how to.
Knows what's going on.
Can manually jump in and get the rest of it done.
Exactly. So like, I think of it the same way. Yeah. Hope that answers that question.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's awesome.
Anything else?
Not so much on the midstream front. What else do you want to... Anything else you guys are doing that you want to chit chat on? We can like intro a question to it.
Okay, yeah.
For people that this is maybe getting a little political, but like pipelines, people are very against them.
Yeah.
As someone that doesn't know a whole lot about it, why? Like why?
Like I think it's like like part of the reason why you guys started this podcast is like the industry just has such a bad rap because like nobody's ever focused on PR in the industry, right? And so I think it's just like, you know, pipelines just like they're ugly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But like what people don't know is like under US soil is 2.4 million miles of pipeline. Like the entire economy runs off of this. And like you can't
just shut it all off.
You can't just shut it off.
What are we gonna do?
Yeah, exactly. What are we gonna do? And so I think it's a lot of just like bad press over the years. But if you actually look at like, you know, the whatever unit equivalent would make sense, like a pipeline is the safest, most cost-effective, most energy efficient way to move energy.
Right.
I guess people just don't think of moving oil as energy. Maybe they just think of electricity as moving energy, but the oil makes the electricity in a lot of cases. So,
right.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask that because before we started the podcast, way back when, kind of it led to the idea of starting it, we had a little Energy 101 session with Colin, and he mentioned the pipeline and things. And I said, and I brought up Jules' point, I kind of said, this seems way safer than the alternative. So why do people dislike them so much? Because the alternative of moving that oil is what?
Like tankers, trains,
right, which can crash, wreck.
I mean, trains, I think there's like, I haven't seen the numbers, but like, I know that like train explosions are way more common than pipeline, especially oil pipeline. Because like an oil pipeline is a leak, yes, and that's horrific and it should never happen. But it doesn't, like an oil pipeline doesn't explode. Right?
Yeah.
Gas pipelines do, and that has happened. But oil pipelines don't explode. But oil train cars will.
Absolutely. And those are the things that aren't being talked about. I remember, I think it was with the Keystone Pipeline, and that's all to Jules's point, getting political. That's a big hot topic for a lot of elections. And
totally,
I feel like you never hear the quote unquote upside to the pipeline and why it's still better than the alternatives.
Yeah. And I think it's like, I think even the positioning around some of the upside that like the companies themselves try to position, like they're not winning hearts and minds. They're just saying like, it'll create jobs. And it's like, but that doesn't win hearts and minds. Right. And so like, how do you actually like use some actual like sales tactics and marketing tactics and like convince people with emotion as opposed to like logic, because that's not working.
Right.
And I feel like so many times with things like oil and energy and, you know, just other things, it's always kind of the lesser of two evils. So someone
100%.
convincing them that it's better than the alternatives. It's not a perfect solution, but it is the best solution for what we've got.
Yeah.
And that's it at the end of the day.
For right now.
Right now, that's what we're working with.
Yeah. And also like, it's like that philosophy that incremental changes can add up to massive changes, right? Like there is no silver bullet for any of this, and we have to stop pretending that there is. And so like, using a pipeline now rather than rail is better. Does that mean that that's what we want to do forever? No. But like for now, like that's fantastic. And then once we have that established, then what else can we do?
Yeah,
and I think
we keep evolving.
Yeah.
Evolve or die. Exactly. And I think that's what a lot of people who are against oil and gas in the traditional sense are very much looking for a solution
that doesn't exist.
That doesn't exist right now. And they're looking for something to happen tomorrow. Like we were talking before we hit record, so we'll backtrack a little bit about how there are some people that think that we can just stop using oil and gas right now, tomorrow. We're just going to stop and the world's just going to keep moving.
It's not the case.
And we'll just deal with the fallout. And it's like,
right.
I don't think anyone understands what they'd even be signing up for.
Absolutely not.
Like
there's no way.
It would be chaos. I don't even want to imagine a world without it.
Yeah. So well, like even fashion, right? Like fashion doesn't exist without it. Right. It's which most people in the fashion industry probably don't realize.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely one of our biggest goals at DW is providing a platform for companies to be able to tell their story better. So, and also why we started this podcast. So
yeah, I like the AirPods too because I need a new pair for Christmas. I was just telling my family about it, and the plastic. Yep. So many things. Everything in this room. The phone.
All of this equipment.
All the equipment.
Yeah, and not just what the material itself, but the energy required to manufacture the material. That gets forgotten as well.
It does get forgotten. I feel like a lot of electric vehicle owners forget that. Yeah. That so many charging stations, if they're not solar, are plugged into traditional
like
electric outlets.
And which is probably, depending on the geolocation, is supplied by your gas cogen plant, which is natural gas, which is coming from a pipeline.
Right.
Right. And so it's
all connected.
It's all connected. Yeah. And then the electrification, like, the grid needs to be expanded, and that's fantastic. But another thing that people forget too is the line losses in transmission lines. Right. So if you're like, and I don't know the math behind this, and I'd have to look it up, but if you're long haul transporting electricity, your actual losses might be such that it doesn't make any sense to move that much electricity via long haul lines. And you might actually it might be more energy efficient to have a gas power plant closer to those locations and a gas pipeline to it, right? Like people don't think about that either.
Yeah.
So, and then that's midstream.
and that's also midstream.
back to why we're here.
To midstream.
Back to midstream.
I love it.
We love midstream. It's great. But yeah, and then you gas up at your 76 gas station that came from midstream,
right?
Which also probably has an electric charging station, as it should.
It probably does. I feel like they're getting in. We're actually recording another episode tomorrow. With
blanking on the name.
Let me look. We'll edit it in.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it wrong. It's a Nup or a Noop. We don't know.
Yes, it is him.
I want to make sure I pronounce it
not
right.
exactly which.
It's electric charging station.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes.
Yeah. Another thing I was just imagining, if we didn't have our phones, our clothes either. Just imagine a world where we didn't have clothes or phones.
Yeah.
And everyone's just walking
charging.
around.
That's what it is.
Oh, very cool.
Yep. So tomorrow we're recording another Energy 101 episode with Pangea Charging.
Fun.
And their kind of mission is to get more charging stations around. We just had our Fuse conference in Edo, and so he emailed after and he was like, hey, do you guys know who I can reach out to in the Edo area that can kind of be in charge of getting more electric charging stations out there?
Fun.
So that's kind of his mission in life, and it's accessibility. And I liked what you said about a little bit goes a long way, and it's the small changes that will eventually get us to where most of the world wants to be.
Exactly. So a few more charging stations makes a difference, right? Because then it will start changing such that, well, we maybe do need to beef up the grid in this area.
Right.
Right. But then there's time to do it, and it can be done incrementally, and it can actually be done.
Right. Exactly. Most importantly, it can actually get done.
Yes, exactly. And then when you guys had the freeze, right?
God. I was just thinking about that because
it was wild.
It's, almost December, January, February. That's when it happened.
Yeah.
So let's hope that that does not happen again.
Does not happen again, right? So I think like that's probably it for Midstream. So hopefully that like explained enough with enough analogies that people could like follow, I think, what Midstream is. But another way to think of it too is like plumbing of the world.
Yeah.
Right? Because people don't really realize it. But like, there's sewer systems in cities, but there's also like gas and oil systems in cities and the world.
Right.
So, right. It's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah. Or I also like to think of it sometimes of like, if you look at the world as like veins and arteries, that's another thing, right? It's just kind of making it this big ecosystem, but some people will not like that I use that word ecosystem, but it still is how it works.
I mean, but right? To that exact point, could you imagine just overnight flipping a switch and shutting it all off?
Yeah. It's like, well, we all just,
the chaos ensues.
Chaos ensues. Exactly. Could be an interesting plot for like a movie.
I was just thinking that, like a Netflix movie.
Yeah.
We
like,
should,
new idea.
Produced by Digital Wildcatters.
Yes.
What happens?
Documentary style, like full on.
Yes. What happens if we turn off
everything?
A good idea.
Everything.
That would be fun.
Nobody steal it.
It's actually trademarked and copyrighted right now.
Hey, you guys own this content, so yes.
We own it. You heard it here first.
You did hear it here first. So we're going to move into rapid fire.
Okay,
ready?
Ready.
All right, what's the number one misconception about the energy industry?
Ooh, I think what I would think that the number one misconception is like folks just assuming that all oil and gas companies are like these profit-sucking devils, not understanding that like the market actually sets the prices, and when they're making good profits, it has nothing to do with them. It just has to do with like supply and demand of commodities.
I love that answer.
It's like economics 101.
It's just economics 101.
Yeah.
Like Exxon's not like sucking like profits out of people, out of consumers. That's not at all what's happening. Like, it's like, and then you could look at like a company like Apple could bring their prices down quite a bit, but they don't.
Yeah, exactly. But they absolutely don't. They keep going up.
They keep going up, and they actually have price control, whereas oil and gas companies do not have price control. So that's probably, I would think, the biggest misconception.
Yeah. Number 2, why should I care about the energy industry?
Ooh, I think we covered that a lot today.
Yeah, we did.
And that has to do with like everything you're wearing, everything you're doing requires energy. And then like, also too, like I love like also doing like the thought exercise of like people in developing nations, like who are we to say in like first world countries that they can't have access to their own like drilling oil and gas to accelerate their own economies? Like who the hell are we to say that? Right? Like, so that's another one that kind of tugs on my heartstrings a little bit of like, yeah, why should someone be burning coal in their kitchen when they could have electricity powered by like a natural gas station, natural gas generating station to like help them live better and like improve their quality of life? Like, who are we to say that they can't have that?
Exactly.
We took a trip to Costa Rica as a team in May, and it's still very underdeveloped in a lot of the rural kind of jungle areas. And as we were driving around and hiking and doing all those things, it was interesting, I think, to us as a team, just it kind of hit home.
Yeah, it did.
You know,
energy.
How many people still do not have access to
clean, reliable energy.
Clean, reliable energy in the way that we think about it here, because it is such a part of our everyday lives.
Exactly. And so, so then who are we to say that other nations can't have that? Right? Like, that's not cool.
It's not cool at all. I wouldn't like that if I was living there.
No. Like, but then you like villainize those countries for being like all pro oil and gas, but it's like
they want it.
Yeah.
They see what we have, and it makes sense.
It does. It does.
Last one. What's your most embarrassing story in your career? It's our favorite question.
Most embarrassing story in my career. The one that's probably was just like the most mortifying, where I like came out of it like just shaking, was we got into like a Techstars program in Norway, and we went to Norway, and it's like just me and my co-founder, and there's this bunch of engineers at this like oil and gas company, and I had to go in and like pitch to them essentially, and they were we were just so early as a company. And the way that the room was even architected was like they were in like bleachers above me, and I had to like sit down below, and I was just like by myself, and they were just grilling on like, all the aspects of like same misconceptions. But at the time I was like so much more not used to talking about it all the time, so I didn't have the confidence. And like essentially it was like a full hour of just getting punched in the face.
Oh, no.
my gosh.
Yeah. And I just like, I came out of it just like shaking and like just red in the face. And like, that was mortifying, right?
No.
So that's probably.
Yeah, you're probably just like, when is this going to be over?
Yeah, I'm just
the
like, are
whole
they done
time.
yet? Are they done yet? Like, I'm tired of hearing I'm stupid. I know I'm stupid. I know this is dumb. I know
Oh.
we should never do this, right?
Oh my
like,
gosh. The fact that they were in bleachers makes it
made
so
it
much
so
worse.
much worse.
So much worse.
Like, if we were at like a round table like this, I think I would have been able to like hold my own and handle it. But the
Right.
fact that they were in bleachers and just like, it was such an interesting lesson of like the dynamics of a space and how that can like really change how you feel about things. So I don't think it was like a glorious, like, this is super embarrassing, but like looking back on it, I found it kind of funny. Because like looking back, I would have just stood up. Right. I'm like, bring it.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go. But at the time I was like, I'm so scared. I have this idea and I don't know what to do. So please help me. Help me. I know I'm really stupid.
Oh my God, I hate that.
Yeah. But I think, it's like, yeah, it was super embarrassing at the time and it's super embarrassing looking at it now because it's like, okay, I could have done a lot to mitigate those feelings, but whatever, you live and learn.
How long ago was that?
Oh, that was probably 3.5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, because I guess we didn't really talk about how long Crux has been around.
Yeah, we have existed for 5 years.
Love that.
But I caveat out the first 2 years real hard because like when I started the company with my co-founder, I had never heard of startups. I'd never heard of venture capital. I'd never heard of Silicon Valley. I'd never heard of a sales pipeline or procurement. So it was like the learning curve was like the steepest thing of all time. And I was like not getting paid. And so
Right.
it was like 2 years of just sheer terror of like assuming this thing was going nowhere. And then we got into an accelerator program, which completely changed the game for
I
us.
love that.
Yeah. And then it was like, okay, no, this is a thing. There's just a lot of things that I don't know, but like this is something the industry needs.
But you can learn it.
Yeah.
I can
And
learn
you
it.
have.
Yes.
I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sitting and getting absolutely berated by a bunch of engineers in a bleacher like helped me build the confidence to be able to
Yeah, look where you are
do it.
today.
Right. What
Yeah.
doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Almost killed me though. I thought I was gonna vomit.
And here you are.
Yeah. That one was like full on nausea. So
That sounds terrifying. And
Yeah,
I'm
that
very
does
sorry
sound-
that you had to go through
I know. Me too. I'm just imagining myself in that position. I probably would have vomited during.
Or I would have started
about
crying.
it. Yeah. Or I might
Oh,
have
I
started
almost
crying.
did.
I would have started
I
crying.
might have did both, honestly.
I went to the bathroom and cried. I did after. Like it was like I went and I just bawled. Like
Dude, there's something where it's like when you know your face is so red and
Yeah.
it's just like,
And you
you're
can
trying to
feel it
calm yourself
pulling.
down, but it's like, this is never going to end. And they
No.
can totally tell that my face is so red.
Yeah.
Ugh,
And they're
I hate
probably
that
all sitting
feeling.
there like, is she gonna cry? Is she gonna cry? Is she
Yeah.
gonna cry?
yeah, and they're like, told you so. Told you so. This is
Ugh.
dumb. Like that's like
Oh
it's
my
like-
gosh.
So I hope the cringe has came out. Like everybody's just cringing. So maybe not most embarrassing moment, maybe it's not like most cringeworthy moment.
Oh yeah. I feel like a lot of them have been pretty cringeworthy too.
Pretty cringeworthy. Yeah, cringeworthy's like, depends on your humor type, but it's typically fun.
Yeah, like secondhand embarrassment I get for like other people.
Yeah, oh, so
And I'm
you're
like,
feeling it right
"Ooh,
now.
thanks." Yeah.
Love it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're heading back to San Francisco tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow afternoon after
Love
meeting
it.
with a customer that we love.
Cool.
nice.
So
Good. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah,
And
thanks for
tune
having us.
in next time for another episode. Hit subscribe. If anyone wants to sponsor this
Yes.
podcast or any of our podcasts, let us know.
We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.